All right, everybody, welcome back. Good evening. More of a night at this point, later than I usually upload, but we got more stuff we got to get to. It is Black Monday. You expect Black Monday to be a little more active than the typical day of following a football team. So, we're going to do the other half of the Pro Football Focus stuff now. We're going to take a look at the defensive grades. We're going to take a look at the Pro Football Focus defensive grades. And this was the side of the ball that I think disappointed a lot of people. There were a lot of problems, a lot of issues. I will say Pro Football Focus doesn't seem to think we did all that poorly. If you take a look at these numbers, take a look at their grading, they thought we did fairly well. I don't know if I can put lipstick on the pig of giving up 25 points and 400 yards to Jimmy Garoppolo and Tutu Atwell and I'd say Blake Corum, but it wasn't even Blake Corum, right? They had their third string running back and they had a backup offensive lineman, and you wouldn't have noticed. They produced more than the Rams offense did in week 9 with Stafford, with their starting offense, well, most of their starting offensive line. So, nevertheless, we don't look at Pro Football Focus to always get it right or always get it wrong. We just look at it because they do good work and it's worth evaluating. So let's dive in, starting at the top where there is a clear number one. And this kind of took me by surprise. I didn't think he played badly, but Artie Burns getting a 90 grade in this game was not something I was expecting. So good for him. I do think that he played a fine game. I don't know if I'd go this far, but they gave him good marks in every category. They gave him a 89.2 in coverage. Like, this is pretty remarkable stuff. So shout out to Artie. Great game. And if he wants to come back next year, I say we could use the veteran experience on the defense. Ernest Jones, another high-graded player, which I kind of expected. And I anticipated that he would be graded high. I thought he did quite well. We stopped the run pretty good in this game. And Ernest Jones, to my knowledge, didn't really do anything bad or wrong. 77.9. And then you've got standout performances from your two studs. Spoon, 75.7, and Big Cat, 75.7, identical. And I didn't think Spoon played particularly well, so this is notable. And I'm not saying I agree with it, but it is notable that Pro Football Focus gave him that score. So maybe that just goes to show you that there are things going on beyond just his ability to affect. And again, I think that people are probably being a little hard on Witherspoon right now, but I am surprised to see him fare this well after the game he played on Sunday. Big Cat, though, I totally get that. Big Cat played great. Julian Love, also a really good grade, which makes sense. He had a pick. He was a really good in coming up in run support, really good tackling. Uchenna Nwosu also came out well, as did Boye Mafe, which surprised me a little bit because I didn't think either player did a ton. And as you start to look through these numbers, as you start to look at these grades, I think what happened here is that the Rams basically allowed the Seahawks to get a lot of pressure by design because they were running screen passes where they do play action, they let the pass rush get upfield to Jimmy, and then Jimmy dumps it off. And it worked really well for them, but in a technical sense, the Seahawks are getting a ton of pressure. And we'll get to that later in this video. We did get a lot of pressure. I just don't know how much of it was impactful because a lot of our pressure was gotten on plays where the Rams still got a big play because the pressure kind of played right into their hands. Like, they got Uchenna Nwosu with 2 pressures and they got Boye Mafe with 3. I watched that whole game. I didn't feel like either guy made a big actual positive impact. When they did get pressure, I felt like it was playing right into the Rams' hands. So that's a tricky one. You have to judge that one using a couple different considerations. But that's kind of what I'm taking away from that. Mike Morris played 3 snaps, so whatever. Reek Woolen, fairly well graded. Not bad. Not a bad way to close his season. I don't know what's going to happen to him. It is worth noting he didn't play a lot, but he played 19 snaps. Kobe Bryant, good respectable grade as well, 67. And then, and only then, do you get down to the players that were graded out a little more in the mediocre realm from that 65 to 55 territory. So a lot of players graded out well, but I feel like it's inflated by some empty pressures, personally. That's my take right now. That's why I think there's a disconnect between this grading and our results on the field. Roy Robertson Harris, respectable game. They actually gave him 3 pressures. Jaron Reed, respectable. Nothing stand out this week according to them, but okay. Draymond Jones does typical Draymond Jones stuff, just kind of like, he's out there grinding. He's not a bad player, but he's just not worth the money. Hankins, workable. 57.6 from Hankins is something I'm happy to live with. Trey Brown, I think this is being pretty generous to him. So I'm a little surprised by that, but good for Trey Brown. Tyrese Knight, 55. He was actually one of the guys who I thought played fairly well, so this surprises me. They killed him for his run defense, which that was not my experience. And then you've got Derek Hall. Derek Hall kind of segues us from the mediocre players into the players who were just kind of bad. And again, it's the run defense, which is interesting because we didn't give up a lot on the run. Sorry about that. I had to answer my phone. But that rounds us out with a couple of guys that they thought played really poorly. I'm not going to include Murphy because he only played 3 snaps and it doesn't mean anything. But Nehemiah Pritchett, sub 40, which surprises no one. He did not play well. Not to the surprise of nobody, I think. Also on that count. And Rayshon, who was also very bad. So, not far from expectations. I just feel like some of these players got boosted grades because of empty pressures. Run defense, taking the run defense in isolation. I want to give it up to Ernest Jones. I'm sorry. Well, I do want to give it up to Ernest Jones, who did play a good game, and he got multiple run stops in this game. The Rams didn't run the ball a ton, so that's notable. But Leonard Williams, week after week after week, he's getting run stops. He's a defensive lineman. He's an interior down lineman, and he's often the most productive run stopper on this team. Very rare you see a team that doesn't have a linebacker be their most productive run stopper. Leonard Williams is up there. So, phenomenal work from him. It's not just the sacks, people. The 11 sacks are definitely where it starts, but there is so much more going on here than just the sacks. Really crazy stuff. Boye Mafe, 2 run stops as well, which that contributed to the good grade. I will say that. That has nothing to do with the pressures, empty or not. So, pretty good game from the run defense overall, in my estimation. Okay. So, let's go over to the pass rush here. I already talked about this, but the numbers were high, and they came from all over the place. Jaron Reed with 4 pressures. Derek Hall with 4 pressures. You got 3 pressures from Boye Mafe, Roy Robertson Harris, Leonard Williams. We got 2 pressures from Ernest Jones, including a sack, by the way. Finally, welcome to the board. Artie Burns. We had 2 pressures from Draymond Jones. Uchenna Nwosu. Got a pressure from Tyrese Knight, which was a sack. Got the Mike Morris pressure, and he only played 3 snaps. You got Hankins, 28 pressures, including 4 sacks, 6 hits. Like, that's really good, but again, watching that game, it felt a little bit empty. It felt a little bit like the Rams wanted us to get pressure, and when we got pressure, they were like, good, that is exactly what we wanted. And on these plays where we got pressure, it felt like the Rams ate us up. There was a point in that game where it just felt like every time Jimmy Garoppolo got the ball, he was going to do play action, get pressure right in his face, and check it down for a big gain. And it was like clockwork. So I don't know how much we're supposed to take away from these numbers. They are very good numbers, but contextually, I do have some questions. And I wonder if this is something that Pro Football Focus could find a way to incorporate into the way they evaluate things. But if it's in their grading, it doesn't seem like it. Look at how good these grades are. Okay, coverage. I like to look at PFF's coverage to contrast it a little bit with the Pro Football Reference coverage. And you can see there's some really good stuff and also some really bad stuff here. The bad is mostly Nehemiah Pritchett. 7 targets, 100 yards. Really, really got pushed around in this game. Really, really got bullied. And again, I'm a fan of Nehemiah Pritchett. I think he's going to be a good player in this league, but he's not ready right now, and we saw that in this game. And some people were saying, oh, we should play Pritchett the whole game, see what he has. We don't need to see what Artie Burns can do, but what Nehemiah Pritchett did yesterday did not help, right? He didn't learn anything from that. All he did was learn how to get whipped. Julian Love also gave up a lot. It was only 3 completions, 7 targets, but 52 yards. Not the worst, but gave up over 50 yards in coverage. That is something that Julian Love struggled with last year. Haven't seen it as much this year. Rayshawn, rough game for him. 3 targets, 40 yards. It just doesn't work here. It just never worked. Witherspoon, 8 targets, 39 yards, which is good, but then you have 2 touchdowns allowed. That's hard to get past. So hard for me to be too overly praiseful of that when he gives up the 2 touchdowns, but it is worth noting this is probably why he was graded out pretty well regardless. He gave up less than 5 yards a target. Beyond that, you've got Tyrese Knight, 6 targets, 35 yards. No problem living with that. Trey Brown, 2 targets, 32 yards, and then he got hurt, so yikes. A game to forget in what is probably his final game as a Seahawk. Artie Burns, 4 targets, 22 yards. Nice little game that he played. No problems there, really. Ernest Jones, 0 completions allowed. Reek Woolen, 0 targets. Kobe Bryant, 1 target, 2 yards. So there was some standout stuff in this game, but you don't give up 334 passing yards to Jimmy Garoppolo without coming out looking a little bit bad. And there was definitely some bad. Pritchett single-handedly probably turned most of the fan base against him with just that one game. Hopefully he gets better next year, but that was rough. And that's how you get here. But it's not just him. Rayshawn, to a certain extent, Spoon, Julian Love to some degree. It all added up to a pretty rough game in coverage. And special teams, a lot of guys actually had above average grades in this game, which is atypical of a typical Seahawks game, I think. Drake Thomas leads the way. Trey Brown actually respectably here. Jake Bobo had one of his better special teams grades of the season. And the only guy who was poor was Rayshawn Jenkins and I guess a little bit of Mike Morris. So Rayshawn's not getting it done on any level. And Dixon and Myers, they continue to be the men. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. That'll do it for this video.